I was halfway through a lukewarm coffee when the runner found me. "Sergeant Morales, Ops wants you yesterday." The cup rattled on the metal desk when I set it down. On base, you learn to tell the difference between a hurry and a hurry. This was the second one, the kind that travels through the floor before a word is spoken. The ops hallway always smelled like dry printer ink and boots. I passed a corkboard crowded with laminated weather charts, dog-eared safety posters, a faded Polaroid of a softball team in warmer months, and turned into the briefing room. Lieutenant Erin Kaplan waited alone at the head of the table. Her brown hair was pinned back so tight I could hear it when she turned. The big wall screen behind her held a still frame of the world's brightest white. "Sergeant," she said, "close the door." I did, and the room got quieter by half. Even the HVAC seemed to hold its breath. Kaplan slid a file across the table. Not many things still wore paper in this building. The folders tab had two phrases stamped in red: recover and deny. "Where's the crowd?" I asked, taking the seat that put my back to the wall. "You're the crowd," she said. "Small team, low signature." She tapped the remote. The wall screen came alive, satellite sweep of the archipelago we called the Cold Line. Snowfields the size of small countries, ridges that looked like someone had combed the world with a dull rake. "Transport went down 3 hours ago," she said. "Sea Line military livery, crew of 5. We have the manifest for standard cargo. We also have," she looked at the folder, "an addendum that doesn't live on the network." I flipped pages, bolts, spools of cable, ration boxes, medical kits. A final line blocked out the censor bar as thick as a finger. "Let me guess," I said. "That part's the deny." "That part's the don't repeat," Kaplan said. "We're not the only ones with eyes. Russian special purpose folks are moving out of Koltony. We're closer." "Closer," I said, glancing at the map scale, "is a generous word." She nodded. "Weather turns in our favor in the way it turns against most things." Her mouth did the smallest thing that almost became a smile. "The storm buys us cover. It also shreds comms, ground, and air. You'll take Snowcat Echo, she's the least cranky. Fuel, rations for 72 hours. A mechanic, a medic, a comms pair that can sign in their sleep." She slid me a second sheet. "Team select provisional. Morales Daniel NCO, navigation/ice judgment. Shaw Priya 68W cold injuries field experiments. Duarte Oscar mechanic/driver. Burns Riley comms cold weather ops. Kaplan Aaron OIC." I raised an eyebrow. "You coming along, ma'am?" "If I order you into a falling sky," she said, "I go first." No bravado, it landed like a fact. "What's the deny look like?" I asked, flipping the last page. Kaplan took a breath as if placing a weight on a scale. "If it's in one piece, we take it. If it's in two, we take both. If it's in dust, we make colder dust." "Understood," I said, and felt the click in my chest I get when the world narrows to a line of tasks. Kaplan tossed me a thin black rectangle. "Personal beacon. If your radio dies, this blinks on satellites old enough to vote. Your wife still prefers texts." "Emails," I said. "They come with fewer read receipts." We didn't do the small talk. We had the map. We had the storm. "Wheels in 30, Kaplan said. "Bring your worst sweater. You don't gear up for an Arctic run, you become gear. Base layers that pull sweat off and push heat in. Mid layers that hold air like a promise. Shell that turns the wind into someone else's problem. Doc Shaw has a superstition about socks. Brand new pair for any mission with deny in the folder. Bad luck to go in with holes," she says, and pretends she's kidding. In the motor pool, the Snowcat waited. Echo was an old orange rectangle on tracks that could roll over a drift like a loaf of bread. Duarte had his head half buried in the engine bay, whispering the particular prayers mechanics use, brand names and curse words. "Say it's an alternator," he said without looking up. "Say it's a belt. Say it's not an electronic gremlin that hates only me. Say it starts," Doc said, handing him a torque wrench like a scalpel. Burns did radio checks with his gloves off. Montana kids think fingers don't feel until -20. He looked 20 on good days, 40 when the wind blew, which meant 20 today. I watched his breath fog into the kind of smoke my father used to blow on winter mornings in Albuquerque, when our desert tried to pretend it knew snow. Kaplan arrived with a small backpack that looked like nothing and weighed like everything. "Mount up," she said. We rolled at gray 30. The gate swallowed us and gave us to the white. The storm wasn't a curtain. It was a room, and the room had corners. One minute we swam in a whirl of flakes the size of rice. The next minute the world sharpened like the storm had turned its face. The snowcat's headlights lit a cone of suspended dust. Beyond that, blank. "Radio window in 10, Burns said, checking a readout that flickered like a candle. "Then the dead zone, then lucky if we can shout." "Got it," Kaplan said. "Keep it short and sweet." I drove because Echo liked me. You don't question it when machines pick favorites. You accept the grace. Tracks churned, the cabin thrummed, and the heater tried its serious best to make a dent. Doc Shaw watched the world with a medic's eyes, not the scenery, the threats, the color of Oz's nose, the way Kaplan flexed fingers to force blood through. "Morales," Doc said after 20 minutes, "drink." I took the water bulb, no arguing. Cold kills stupid. Dehydration is stupid with a badge. "Edge coming," I said and pointed with my chin at the altimeter creep. "Shelf drop." Kaplan braced one hand on the dash, the other on the roof like it could change gravity. "Echo likes your hands," she said. "Indulge her." We did the shelf like a polite apology. Tracks bit slid bit again, the whole box yawed left and came back. Oz whooped because Texas boys can't help themselves when physics tries a trick. "Respectfully," I said, "keep the ye to a minimum." He grinned. "Yes, Dad." "Your dad would tell you to shut up," Burns said, eyes on the spectrum analyzer that spelled calm's life or death. "Don't talk about my dad," Oz said, still smiling, and then he looked out into the white like maybe he had. The GPS track edged us toward a long scar on the satellite still, the kind of grind you get when a thing hits hard and skates. Wreckage sometimes looks like celebration confetti if you're cruel and stand far away. Up close it looks like a story you can't stop reading. "Visual in 5, Kaplan said. "Visual in nothing," Burns said. "That's the point." He wasn't wrong. The wreck popped from the snow the way a bruise blooms under skin. First a dark length that could have been anything. Then the angles, tail off, cockpit gone, belly torn. The middle section sat too intact, as if it had thought about getting up and decided to rest instead. We parked outside the debris field and the wind did us the favor of quiet. That's how you know you're deep, the sound gets honest. "Goggles," Doc said. "Seals, tape the wrists. No hero skin." Kaplan set the plan with a pen on her glove. Concentric search, then in. We moved like a 5-fingered hand, and the white tried to freeze us one finger at a time. Inside the fuselage the cold had texture. A crackle under boots, frost in feathery ribs, the weird flat silence of a place sealed and then broken. Oxygen masks hung in their yellow mouths. A sleeve stuck out from under a seat like a small, polite question. "No bodies," Doc said first, because medics are trained to count. No blood. We swept headlamps and saw postcards of stopped moments, a game of cards embalmed in ice, a photo of a child and a dog on someone's tray, a thermos welded to the floor by a spill that had become sculpture. It should have felt like grief. Instead, it felt like a room in a museum that hasn't picked a name. Cargo Bay, Kaplan said. Morales, Oz, you're with me. Burns, dock on perimeter and cockpit. 30 minutes. Hard stop. The cargo door had kinked in a way that made metal sound like old bones when we forced it. My headlamp swung over crates, netting, 1,000 straps that had done their job until forces laughed at knots. I saw the manifest clipboard where it had been clipped and then thrown and then lodged again, as if the plane itself wanted to keep its paperwork neat. Kaplan found the square case because she was looking for the thing that didn't belong. All the crates were wood or polymer. The square was steel ribbed and it wore its warning signs like medals. Biohazard in 3 languages. Temperature strip compromised. She crouched without touching it. Deny, she said. Oz let out a breath that fogged his goggles. Feels like the part where we don't touch the glowing rock, he said. It's not glowing, I said. Metaphor, Dad. The corner seam had frost growth, not the feathery kind but a black rime that looked like midnight had crawled out and fallen asleep. The latch mechanism had lost a piece in the crash. A secondary lock held, half-bent. Doc, Kaplan called on the short range. We found something that gets capital letters. Copy, Doc said. Vitals good, cockpit clear, 0 bodies. What's your something? Square steel biohaz breached. Silence crackled. Don't open yet, Doc said, and you could hear the medic trying to be the scientist the room needed. Let me. The secondary lock rotated in my hand. I hadn't meant to. That's how simple it was. My glove wanted to test a thing, and my wrist obliged in the way hands do when brains are busy. The lid lifted a thumb's width, and a sound like a grain of sand skittering across aluminum came out. All 3 of us froze with the lid like men in a photograph. Back, Kaplan said, voice so level a person might not notice the rock at its center. We stepped away together in a small choreography, and the lid, left to its weight and gravity, did the rest. The inside surface bloomed with a dark that wasn't empty. Not liquid, not gas, something that loved edges. It moved like the way hair floats in water, except there wasn't water. There was air and cold and our breathing in masks. The dark lifted in a small sheet, tore itself into filaments and reached. Back, Kaplan said again, and that time it was loud. A filament wriggled like thread shaken in static and found my sleeve. The fabric should have scoffed. It was triple-layered, taped, good to the spec Doc swore by. The filament didn't care. It wicked, curious as a cat, and I felt the smallest cold pinch on the slope of my wrist bone where my sealed tape had the tiniest wrinkle. I shook my hand like it was a bee. The filament recoiled and lifted like a shocked eel. More tore off the sheet, hairs, a cloud of hairs finer than breath in bright sun. Oz did the brave slash stupid thing and swatted with a gloved palm. 3 filaments slapped his glove, then collapsed into ink spreading through paper. He cursed, and then the curse turned into a sound I had last heard when I watched a man get his finger caught in a drill press. Doc's voice crackled in my ear like a lifeguard whistle. Freeze it or leave it. Do not feed it heat. Kaplan's hand hit the light switch on reflex. The cargo bay went dim. Our headlamps made cones again, and in those cones the filaments stirred like they had been woken rudely. Not afraid of dark, interested in light. Out, Kaplan said, calm as a recipe card. Team out. Sergeant, close it if you can without being clever. I used the toe of my boot and the back of my knuckles like the case was a snake you gently suggest go home. The lid settled. The filaments that had escaped clung to the rim, uncertain. I blew a long, slow breath across them. The way you test a candle that's thinking about going, not the way you try to win. And the filaments drew back as if my breath were a wind that felt like winter. Copy perimeter, Burns said in my ear at the same time the wind outside shifted key. We've got company. 3 no, 4 warm targets on thermal, moving fast, too fast. Russians, Kaplan asked, already knowing the answer. Not if Russians move like they were learning how to walk from a manual. My wrist burned, not surface burn, under. I put my hand under my other arm and the burn eased, which is not how burns work. Oz, I said, hands. He held them up in the headlamp. His right glove had a dark star around the knuckle that sucked up light. The star pulsed once like the glove had a heartbeat. We're done, Kaplan said. We are leaving and we are doing it as if the floor is hot. We moved, out through the fuselage teeth into the honest wind. The sky had shifted, the gray of storms that want to become night just long enough to scare you. Burns stood 10 yards off, goggles up the way kids do when they want to prove something. Target's closing, he said, not whispering because whispering steals air and cold. 50 yards, jerky gait like marionettes. You always talk like a poet or just when I'm busy, Oz said. He was breathing fast now, and in the white plume of it something glittered, motes catching headlamp. I stepped between his mouth and the wind. Seal checks, Doc said, doing them the way mothers do, firm and mean because love is better that way when it's winter. The first figure broke the drift line, and I had the thought people get when a photo doesn't match the memory. The wrongness shows before the details. The coat was ours. The boots, too. The head was tilted too far to one side like someone had glued it and the glue hadn't set. It took 3 more steps and collected itself like a drunk deciding to walk sober. 2 more figures followed. A 4th came later the way shadows do when you look away. Back to Echo, Kaplan said. Riley, your tail, Doc, eyes on Oz. I walked backward because leaving your eyes on a thing is a kind of spell. The figures felt the looking. Their movement smoothed with every yard as if practice were its own warm. The lead one turned its face toward me, toward us, and the eyes were not eyes. They were a flat, dark with the suggestion of depth, the way wells in cartoons pretend to go to the center of the earth. Behind my sternum, a small boy knocked on a door. Mama, he said. We made echo. Oz climbed like his gloves were glued. Doc shoved him through the hatch and followed. Burns turned once as if counting a prayer. Kaplan held my sleeve and I let her, because good officers sometimes don't know they are holding on for themselves and you don't embarrass them when they do. I slid into the driver's seat and Echo took us like a hand takes a stone you've carried for years. Tracks bit. Wind said a word and took it back. The figures moved, fast now, in a way snow pretends it can't allow. The lead one almost smiled, its mouth opened in a crescent that wasn't joy. Radio window, Kaplan asked without looking away from the mirror. 2 minutes, Burns said. Maybe 1. Doc held Oz's wrist, counting under her breath. The dark star on his glove seemed to breathe with the counting. She took her trauma shears and did a thing medics hate, cut through the glove you can't replace out here. Under the glove his skin was normal until the last knuckle, which had a spiderweb of black hairlines radiating from a pore. You're gonna want to take it, Oz said, trying the joke that had saved him a dozen times since he was a kid. His voice broke on the last word. I'm going to keep your hand, Doc said, but you are going to hate me for a little. She poured the little bottle of clear lyre, chlorhexidine, over the knuckle, and Oz hissed air between teeth. The web retreated a hair, offended by chemistry even if chemistry couldn't claim the win. Heat bad, cold good, she said like a nursery rhyme. Then she opened the side hatch a hand width and let a knife of air in. She held Oz's knuckle into that blade while he swore in polite Spanish and in polite English in equal measures. The web slowed, then stalled. Window, Burns said, and Kaplan nodded. Base, this is Echo on Broomstick. She said on a channel no one honors unless they love you. We have recovered visual on package Sigma. It is active. Repeat, active. We are RTB with contingencies en route. Request your best science and your worst news. Static's a language. In the static I heard a man say copy and a woman say hold, and a tower somewhere say weather, the way weather becomes a character and gets a full speaking role. The figures ran parallel now, learning the machine's rhythm. The lead one leapt a small pressure ridge with a grace that stole half a second of my attention, and in that half second Echo's nose drifted. I corrected. The correction sent us toward a sastrugi that rose like the edge of a roof. We climbed it slow, crested, and on the far side the world dropped 6 feet into a bowl of powder. We went light, we came down heavy, something in the dash popped. Duarte said a word he'd been saving. Burns grabbed the radio in both hands like prayer beads. Echo, Kaplan said, and I loved her for using the machine's name when fear wanted her to use mine. She's with us, I said, and patted the steering column the way you pat a horse you're not sure you deserve. Then, because the truth is wholly in places like this, I added, for now. Doc sealed Oz's hand in a ziplock like leftovers. His breathing slowed by 1 count per 30 seconds and the color came back to the thin skin under his eyes. Kaplan watched the mirror and the men in it who weren't men. The storm took a breath and gave it back to us colder. The thermometer pegged 5 more degrees down and the figures, all 4, stumbled. Only a little, the way you trip on a word in a sentence you know by heart. But Doc saw it and I saw her see it, and we both looked at Oz's bagged hand, and the line between those two things got short enough to touch. Rule 1, Doc said aloud in the cabin where rules live and die. We keep it cold. Rule 2, Kaplan said, eyes on the mirror. We don't get clever. Rule 3, I said, and let my left wrist hang where the burning had become a bite I had to ignore. We leave the glowing rocks alone. Oz laughed because he was grateful to have a job be the laugh. Burns leaned back in his bench, eyes closed, and the kid looked old again for one breath, which is the price the young pay when winter promotes them. The figures kept pace until the bowl gave way to harder snow and the machine found her run. The mirror made them small, then smaller, then impossible. We didn't cheer. This world dislikes triumph. We drank water we couldn't taste and let our sweat become ice in our collars. Next window in 40, Burns said. Copy, Kaplan said. Doc, start your list. She turned to me and did the smallest thing, touched my elbow once with the back of her glove. And morals. Ma'am, good hands. She faced front before I could give the smart answer my wife would have given for me. I kept driving the line until the white looked less like a mouth. The thing in my wrist pulsed once, as if applauding. We did not talk about it. The lid didn't so much open as decide to. A thin gasp of air slid across my cheekbone through the edge of my mask, and the cargo bay's cold seemed to take one deliberate step closer. Morals. Kaplan's voice stayed flat, hands back. Nobody gets curious. Yes, ma'am, I said, already stepping away. Doc Shaw had been a medic long enough to respect procedure and a scientist long enough to hate blind spots. "We need visual confirmation," she said, closing on the case. "If the temperature strip says compromised and we don't verify the breach, we'll be improvising in the dark." "Doc," Kaplan warned. Shaw didn't flinch. She crouched so the headlamp on her helmet haloed the seam. In that cone the frost wasn't white, it was black-laced, as if someone had drawn veins through winter. "Okay," she said to herself, "more than us. Not condensation, not soot. Crystalline growth with pigment, no, with absorption." "English, please," Oz said softly. "It's eating light," Shaw said, "and maybe storing it." Burns hovered in the doorway, half in wind, half in airplane. "We've got 3 warm blips on the ridge," he said, peering at his handheld. "Moving like deer that forgot how to deer." "Copy," Kaplan said. "Doc, 15 seconds, then we're out." Shaw slid a strip of clear plastic, the kind you cover Roman IV ports with, under the lid and lifted the case a 1/4 inch. No hands, no seal break, just enough to let the world peek in. What lived inside the box was not a liquid and not dust. It looked like the absence of both. A black sheet that barely owned its edges, rippling the way hair floats in a bath when you exhale. "Close it," Kaplan said. Shaw didn't. She leaned a fraction closer, eyes narrowed behind her goggles. The look doctors get when they're listening through a stethoscope and hearing a story no one else hears. "It responded to the light earlier," she said. "Let's see." Riley flicked cabin to flood, then back to low. 2 pulses. Kaplan's head snapped. "Negative, we don't." Too late. Burns hit the interior floods on a reflex trained by 100 good intel calls. The cargo bay went white, then dark, then bright again like a camera flash. The black sheet atomized. It didn't explode. It came apart into threads so fine the headlamp turned them to glitter. They rose in a slow bloom that made my skin feel like a switch had been flipped, and everything on it was labeled "Don't." "Doc." Kaplan again, not a shout. The warning you use when a friend is 3 inches from the saw. Shaw's breath fogged her goggles. She didn't move back. "They are motile in air," she said, clinical even now. "Not ballistic, electrostatic, phototactic, it's reaching." One filament touched the edge of her visor and spidered across the polycarbonate as if the plastic were tissue. Another probed the seam of her mask. A third, hair-thin, deliberate, reached for the knuckle of Oz's glove where leather had a crease. "Back," I said, grabbing Oz by the harness and shoving him into the aisle. He stumbled, slammed a shoulder into a seat frame, cursed into his balaclava. "Close it," Kaplan repeated. I kicked the lid with the side of my boot. It dropped that same reluctant inch. The bloom hesitated like a flock changing mind midair. Shaw slid the plastic strip free like a magician palming a card. The lid seated with a bare clink. By then the first motes had found us. Something tickled the skin beneath the tape at my wrist. Not pain, curiosity. As if a moving draft had learned to thread itself between cells. I felt it, and every nerve I owned said, "You're not alone." Shaw saw my posture change. "Where?" she said. "Left wrist," I said, voice small in my own ears. "Don't touch it," she said, already reaching for her kit. "Hands out." Kaplan's headlamp swung and washed my gloves, then the slit where seal tape met sleeve. A black glimmer lived under the translucent edge, pulsing the way a gnat trapped in plastic might pulse. "Riley," Kaplan said. "Light's dead now. Burns killed the floods." Instantly the motes hung heavier, drooped in the cooler air, their glitter gone to shadow. "Hypothesis 1, Shaw said, and the steadiness of her voice calmed something feral in my chest. "They like energy. Light, heat, maybe radio. Hypothesis 2, They're small enough to ride air currents, electrostatic adherence, then wick through warmth leaks. Patch the leak, Kaplan said. Shaw ripped open a flat pack of medical adhesive and slapped it over my wrist seal. The tape had the personality of an angry barnacle. It bit. The tickle retreated a millimeter. Not gone, not gone. Longer term, we freeze it, Shaw said. Short term, we get the hell out. A filament brushed Oz's glove again. He yanked his hand back and swatted instinctively. 3 threads clung, darkened, and shrank into the leather like oil finding grain. Bad idea, Shaw said. Don't give it friction heat. I didn't invite it, Oz said, eyes too wide, bravado leaking. On me, Kaplan ordered. Morale's lid stays down, we move. We moved. The cargo bay teeth caught my pack and tugged like a child you can't shake. I shouldered free and forced myself not to look back at the case. The black rime hugged the seam like a lip. Something skittered inside the metal, no bigger than rice, louder than it had any right to be. The fuselage interior felt warmer than 5 minutes ago because the adrenaline inside me was its own weather system. Headlamps cut cones across torn ceiling panels and dangling masks. Our steps left crisp punctures in drifted snow that had blown in and frozen in place, white footprints inside a metal whale. Targets closing, Burns said from the door. 30 yards. People? Oz asked, hope the size of a child's hand. Burns took an extra second before he answered, which was answer enough. Bodies, he said, moving wrong. We spilled out the torn door into clean wind. The world tried to erase the airplane, redraw it as a shape snow understands. To our right, the ridge rose in a slow wave to a knife edge. To our left, the sun worked behind a curtain too thick to matter. Ahead, Echo crouched with her engine ticking, tracks powdered in white like sugar on an old cake. The 3 figures stepped into view at the top of the ridge. No hurry, no stumble. The first moved like it had studied humans on video and finally got the trick. The second and third were a beat behind, heads cocked to no agreed angle. Shaw, Kaplan said softly, guns are last resort. Cold first. Copy, Shaw said, already palming a chemical ice pack, smashing the internal capsule with a closed fist to start the endothermic party. It hissed like a viper under a blanket. The leading figure turned its face toward us. In another life it had been a man built to haul cargo, jaw you could rest a wrench on. In this life the eyes had gone perfectly, deliberately black, not dull, not filmed, just absent. The mouth sagged open a fraction and I thought of a vent. It started down the slope. Go, Kaplan said. We went. Half run, half fast walk, the pace you use when speed costs traction and you'd like your ankles to live. The wind took our heat away as fast as we made it and I could feel the burn under my wrist seal. Take that as an insult. The pain sharpened, thinned. My left hand tingled like it had fallen asleep in a position it didn't choose. Echo's hatch yawned. Oz threw himself through it and spun to pull Shaw with him. Burns crabbed sideways, keeping his eyes on the ridge, radio tucked to his neck like a violin. Kaplan came last, walking backward, rifle low, barrel steady. The leading figure broke from a jog into something else, smooth, almost floaty, a stride that didn't argue with snow as much as persuade it. Halfway down the slope it accelerated without the mechanics I expect to see. No deeper plant, no push, just more there per second. I hate new physics. I turned the ignition and Echo responded like a dog waking to the voice it loves. The engine's low growl became a chesty rumble. Tracks bit and the whole box lifted a hair on its torsion. Kaplan slammed the hatch with her hip, sealed the dogs, and took the passenger chair without asking. "Drive," she said. "Driving," I said, and gave Echo a little more than she liked so she'd know I trusted her. The ridge fell away in the mirror. The figures didn't. They reached the flat and didn't slow. The lead one ate distance like the world owed it calories. "Comms window in 90 seconds, Burns said, breath loud in his mic. "After that we're on hand signals and prayer." "Pick one prayer," Oz said through clenched teeth. He held his right hand up where Shah could see it. The leather at his knuckle had developed a small star, not a stain exactly. More like the glove had grown a pupil. "Don't move," Shah said. She pulled trauma shears and snipped a clean square around the star, then peeled leather back. The skin beneath was goose flesh pale and unremarkable. "Okay," Oz said, "so maybe." A grain of black appeared dead center on the knuckle, then another adjacent, then a hairline connecting them so fine you had to want to see it. Shah inhaled through her teeth. "Negative," it wicked through, cold now. She cracked a second ice pack and pressed it to the knuckle. Oz's whole body jerked. "Little warning," he said, voice high. "If you want bedside manner," Shah said, "wait for a bed." Behind us, the lead body closed to 20 yards, close enough to read the wash of wind across its hood, to see that the fabric around the eyes didn't move the way fabric should. The mouth flexed once like a fish heaving in air. Kaplan rolled her window down 2 inches and pointed her rifle out at the low ready. "Shah," she said, "rule check." "Rule 1, Shah recited, "keep it cold." "Rule 2, limit light radio friction." "Rule 3, avoid physical contact with obviously compromised tissue or you'll share." "Rule 4, Kaplan said, eyes on the sight, "nothing fancy." I pointed Echo toward a shallow draw that curved east. The map said it ran behind a field of hummocked ice that would slow anything with knees. The lead body adjusted angle when we did, clever as a wolf. 60 seconds, Burns said. "Make the call," Kaplan ordered. Burns squeezed the handset. "Base, Echo, package Sigma is active and particulate. Phototactic probable, thermotactic definite. Contact with crew-equivalent bodies. Repeat, contact with bodies, resulting in motor control imitation." He swallowed audibly. "They're wearing them, sir, over." Static answered first, then a woman with a Midwest vowel. "Echo base, copy active and particulate. Copy phototactic/thermotactic. Standing by for deny or divert." "Deny if we can't contain," Kaplan said, and it cost her something to say it. "Wheel." The window slammed shut as if some invisible hand had cut the thread. Burns stared at the panel like he could will the spectrum to bloom. It stayed flat and innocent. "That's it," he said. "Dark." The lead body hit the drawer and slid, caught itself, and moved faster. Its arms didn't pump like a runner's, they hung and then twitched in tiny self-corrections, marionette micro-adjustments, each step a little truer than the last. Kaplan squeezed off a 3-round burst center mass. The sound in the cabin punched me in the ear hard enough to feel in the teeth. The rounds hit like a fistful of thrown coins, thuds without feedback. The body staggered half a beat, then straightened. No blood, no visible hole, just a drift of black dust that spun off the entry points and then turned and fell back in like iron filings obeying a magnet. "Useless," she said. "Head?" Oz asked. She sighed. "Nothing else for it." We crested a small ridge and the snowcat went momentarily light. In the mirror, the body used that blink to gain 5 yards. Its mouth widened another click and something like a rattle came out. Not human voice, not animal, a static that had opinions. Kaplan put 2 rounds through where nose and eyes should be. The black inside, whatever it was, fluffed outward like gnats in a beam, then recomposed. For half a second the body's legs forgot how to be legs, then they remembered. Rule 5, Shah said tightly. Ballistics are theater. Copy Rule 5, Kaplan said. We use the stage lights then. She toggled the snowcat's roof bar to strobe. Echo answered with a rapid-fire pulse that painted the white world in slices of frozen action. Ridge, hollow, drift, us them us again. The lead body flinched on the first pulse. On the second, every filament that lived inside those hollow eyes made a decision. The head snapped to the roof bar. The mouth opened wider. Then the rattle became a long, drawn tone like a radio between stations when you're moving too fast. They like the light, Burns said. They want it, Shah corrected. They're moving into it, don't feed. Kaplan killed the bar. The tone cut off. The lead body stutter-stepped and almost went down. The two behind it collided and untangled like awkward teenagers. Okay, Kaplan said, tool, not toy. You have to tell me that, I said. Yes, she said, and I felt better. We hit the far lip of the drawer and climbed. Echo grunted, tracks bit. The steering wheel twitched in my hands with the little judgments that make you a driver and not cargo. The ridge beyond was a scraper, wind-carved, hard as old bread. Hold on, I said. We crested and the world broke open into a plain, flat enough I felt it in my stomach. If we carried speed across it, the bodies would trail and tire. If we lost speed, they would not. Morals, Kaplan said evenly. I want fast and I want safe, and I will accept neither less nor more. You'll get a dance, I said, and she nodded like that was the right answer. Oz hissed through his teeth. Doc. Shah had been counting under her breath since the ice pack hit skin. At 10, she lifted it a half-inch, peered, put it back. At 20, she peeled the adhesive back an edge and slid the corner of a clear dressing under, making a cold sandwich around the knuckle. At 30, she said, don't look, which is the phrase guaranteed to make any man try. Oz looked. Under the transparent film, his knuckle had grown pinstripes. Not on the surface, beneath it. Hair-thin black lines ran parallel from the center of the joint toward the wrist, faint as pencil, alive as ants under glass. Oz's mouth opened. Then he closed it and looked at me, eyes doing the math of distance, time, loyalty, and fear. Don't take the glove off, Shah said, which would have been funnier 3 minutes earlier. We can slow it. We might not be able to kill it without taking the hand. Oz stared at his fingers like they were a stranger who had just sat down in his car. It's my right, he said quietly, the joke stripped clean now. I need that one. Then be very still, Shah said, jaw set, and do not love warmth. Behind us the trio fell back to 25 yards, then 30. The wind took most of what they were. The cold took the rest. They didn't stop. They felt the shape of our heat through the glass and the steel and the layered clothes, and they loved it from there. Next comms window in 20, Burns said, eyes on the spectrum like a priest reading stars. Save it for one sentence, Kaplan said. Make it count. He nodded and held the handset like he might hold the hand of someone he was trying to keep from falling. We rode the plane. Echo sang to herself in diesel, a low chord in the bones. My wrist burned in time with my heart. The adhesive squeezed the leak, but I could feel the something under it trace latticework like a climber learning the route on a wall. Doc, I said very quietly. If I say stop, you stop me. If I say keep driving, you take the wheel. I'm not rated, she said. You're rated on me, I said. She didn't nod, she didn't need to. I watched her in the corner of my eye set a little metal pan on the floor, Dump in 2 gel packs, crack them both with the heel of her palm, and lay a third pack across them to build a cold well. She placed Oz's knuckle over it like a jeweler setting a stone. 15 seconds, Burns said. Kaplan rolled the window down half an inch again. The air that came in had a knife in it, but the cabin's warmth met it and dulled the edge. She watched the mirror, then the horizon, then the mirror again, inventorying threats and gifts with the same list. 10, Burns said. Say this, Kaplan told him, eyes still on the world. Sigma is learning, cold slows, light calls, ballistics nothing. Advise containment protocols on our arrival and deny the site from orbit if we don't check in. Copy. He swallowed. That'll play well on Christmas cards. 5. The spectrum bloomed like a flower under glass. Burns pressed the switch. Base, echo, Sigma is learning. Cold slows, light calls, ballistics nothing. Prepare containment on arrival, and if we miss check-in, deny the site. This time the voice came back smooth, like the storm had turned its head to listen. Echo, base, copy all. Containment in prep. Cold assets on standby. You get here, we'll make it a freezer. Roger, Kaplan said. She shut the window and holstered the rifle. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been pocketing. The lead body stumbled for real now, knees not playing the game, arms doing a puppet jig. The two behind it shuffled staccato, every step a negotiation. Cold makes idiots of heroes. It makes machines out of people. I prefer machines to idiots. Oz stared at his hand. Under the clear dressing, the pinstripes had firmed, less suggestion, more statement. They'd crept a quarter-inch toward the wrist, slender as drawn ink. Don't, Shaw said, catching his look. I wasn't going to, he lied. Lie to the lieutenant, Shaw said. Not to me. Kaplan didn't turn, she didn't need to. Nobody lies to anybody, she said. We tell the worst truth fast. Worst truth, Oz said, voice barely a thread. My hand is wearing something. Worst truth, Shaw echoed, and we have a rule for it. Oz shut his eyes. Keep it cold. Good, Shaw said. Now breathe like you're outside your body watching some idiot on TV do this wrong, and you're going to write the comment that saves his life. He laughed, a single, shocked bark, then obeyed. The plane rose again in a long, subtle swell. Beyond it, low hills like old whales rolled under the snow, backbones up. Echo took the grade in stride, engine note deepening into a hum that lives under human hearing and makes you trust things. Ridge, I said. Make it smooth, Kaplan said. I'm a gentleman, I said. We crested. The world beyond was the same and different, more wind-carved, more open, the light flatter. In the mirror, the trio of bodies had become little black punctuation marks on the white page. Don't celebrate, Kaplan said, and the mailbox corner of her mouth softened a millimeter anyway. Wouldn't dream of it, I said, and shook my left hand once like a man trying to convince himself his fingers still belonged to him. I didn't look at the wrist. I didn't have to. The burn had learned a new trick, throb, then cool, then throb again, as if the thing beneath the adhesive were testing how much of my nervous system had a back door. Doc, I said. She met my eyes. In hers I saw 100 choices she'd made in rooms I wasn't there for. She nodded once. Not comfort. Agreement with a math neither of us loved. Cold buys time, she said, not mercy. I nodded back and set Echo's nose at an angle that favored our strongest track. Okay, Kaplan said, half to us, half to herself. We get to Bravo, we don't play hero, we get with science and steel. Oz made a small noise. We all looked. He wasn't screaming. He wasn't even breathing fast. He just held his right hand up into the light like a guy checking a ring. Under the clear dressing, the black pinstripes had blossomed into a pattern. 10, 12 lines now, equidistant, each no thicker than a hair. They ran from knuckle to wrist in clean parallel, and if you watched long enough you could see them move, a slow, patient crawl like ivy that had watched time lapse and wanted its turn. "Lieutenant," he said, voice gone thin, "I think my glove's not the problem." Kaplan didn't move for a half second. Then she put her palm on the dash and pushed herself forward an inch closer to him. "Okay, Oz," she said, calm in the pocket. "Look at me." He did. "We've got you," she said. "We're going to keep it cold." "I like that plan," he said. "Let's keep it very, very cold." He looked down again. The lines had marched another eighth of an inch toward the wrist bone, tidy as pencil on a ruled page. They looked like pinstripes on a good suit. They looked like something drawing a map under the skin with my friend's hand as paper. "Morales," Kaplan said softly, eyes still on Oz. "Drive like you're trying to beat a storm to church." "Copy," I said. Outside, the wind rose and the plane rolled on and the ridge behind us swallowed three shapes. Inside, under plastic and tape and leather, a city no human had planned spread its first roads. The snowcat thundered across the white plain, treads digging deep. Behind us, three worn bodies jitteran like marionettes. Every 100 yards their stride smoothed, their posture adjusted, their speed increased as if each step rewrote muscle memory. 30 yards in closing, Burns muttered from the rear scope. His voice had a new tremor. "They shouldn't be that fast in snow," Oz said. "They shouldn't even." "Stop telling me what they shouldn't," Kaplan snapped. "They're doing it." The cabin filled with the growl of Echo's engine and our breathing. Snow streamed across the windshield in skeins of static. Every minute, the trio of bodies behind us shortened the gap, their motions ironing from jerky spasms into something fluid, predatory. I felt the burn in my wrist deepen. The black filaments under my skin were sketching tracks, not random now. Lines that bent with each flex of my hand, learning my gait as surely as the creatures outside learned to run. "Next window in 3 minutes," Burns said, fiddling with the comms. Then static, then dead air. Kaplan shook her head. "We're in a blackout pocket, storms bending the ionosphere." "So we're blind and mute," Oz said. "Not mute," Kaplan said. "We still scream if we have to." Warning lights blinked red on the dashboard. The engine temp gauge nudged the line. "She's running too hot," I muttered. "Vent cabin heat," Kaplan ordered. "Negative," Shaw said. "If we vent, we warm the hull. They'll track us faster." "They're tracking us already," Oz snapped. Kaplan made the call. "Keep it cold inside, engine first." I twisted the vents wide. Instantly, the inside temperature plummeted. Frost glazed the edges of our faceplates. Our breath crystallized between us. My infected wrist sang with relief, but Oz's jaw locked against the chill. Shaw pointed at my wrist. "Tourniquet now, before it climbs higher. I need both hands on the drive." "I'll do it," Oz said, holding up duct tape from the emergency kit. His infected knuckle striped blacker now, crawling slow up his veins like stitched thread. Shaw wrapped tape tight above my glove, winding until the circulation slowed, sealing it with a slap. The burn dulled but didn't disappear. My left hand tingled, twitching without my permission. Oz met my eyes. "You and me both, Sarge." Burns risked a glance through the rear slit. "They're not slogging anymore. They're pacing each other, 3 strides, leap, 3 strides, leap." Kaplan swore. "They're running like us, they're learning from our tracks." And they were. The snow behind the cat had become a teaching line, our deep grooves a chalkboard for something alien. The comms crackled. "Recovery Alpha beacon signal acquired. Extraction point 2 clicks northeast. Strobes active." Relief burst in the cabin. Through the windshield, a faint orange beacon pulsed against the gray horizon. An aircraft silhouette loomed behind it, engines already running, floodlights haloing the snow. "See, we're saved," Oz breathed. Then the figure appeared, standing in the beacon's glow, arm raised in welcome. A flight suit, helmet cracked, reflective stripes still glinting. One of the downed pilots, alive, waving us in. But even at this distance I saw it, the head cocked at the wrong angle. The hand flapped too smoothly, like a puppet rehearsing hello. And the void black eyes glittered in the beacon light. The hangar was too warm. That was the first thing my skin noticed, not my brain. Heat on my cheeks, air that moved like breath. After the frozen chokehold of the snowcat, it felt like paradise, until I remembered what Shah had said: cold buys time, warmth wakes it up. We rolled Echo through the gate. The extraction site wasn't a full airstrip, just a field hangar erected on the ice, glowing with generator light. Inside, tarps strung as walls, space heaters humming, orange halogen lamps beating down on polished metal. The pilot who'd waved us in shuffled toward us, helmet under one arm. At 30 feet, Kaplan barked, "Hold." His gait smoothed, too smooth, that crooked angle at his neck straightened. He smiled, teeth too perfect, as if he just learned how. Black eyes glittered like glass marbles. "Containment protocol," Kaplan snapped. Two soldiers in cold weather gear stepped forward with rifles raised. They didn't fire. They didn't have to. The message was clear. The pilot froze mid-step, grin stretched wide, then tilted his head with insect curiosity. The soldiers dragged him toward a separate cordoned wing. Inside, medics stripped our gear. The air stank of diesel heaters and sweat. Warmth filled my lungs in gulps, but my wrist itched like a lit fuse. "Don't," Shah muttered, slapping my hand down before I could scratch under the tape. "Heat accelerates it." I noticed it on Oz, too. The pinstripes on his wrist had spread faster since we crossed into the hangar. What had been faint pencil lines were now bold, branching out toward his palm like veins drawn in ink. "Cooler. We need it cooler," Shah said to anyone who would listen. The medic opposite her shook his head. "Orders are to keep ambient high to prevent hypothermia." "Your heaters are feeding it," she snapped. "You want soldiers or husks?" The generators coughed, lights flickered, and half the hangar went dark. A ripple of unease passed through the crew. For a moment, shadows sprawled across the canvas walls, bodies giant and alien. Kaplan turned to Burns. "Comms." He tapped his headset. "Blackout pocket again. They'll think it's weather." The hum of the heaters roared louder in the partial darkness. The air shimmered above them, waves of heat that looked alive. Shah borrowed a thermal scope from one of the perimeter guards. She pointed it at the far wall where the heaters blew. What she showed us didn't make sense. The warm air wasn't diffusing evenly. It curled into micro-eddies, tiny whirlwinds that formed, writhed, and collapsed again. Some of them stretched thin, almost thread-like, running along the seams of the tarps like veins. "They're riding the heat," she whispered. "We're building them highways." Kaplan swore, crossed the hangar, and flipped one of the heaters onto its side. The guard protested, but then everyone saw the same thing. Where the heat died, the eddies collapsed, black motes falling like ash. "Kill the heaters," Kaplan ordered. The temperature dropped fast, every breath turning white again. Relief sparked under my taped wrist, a cold dullness replacing the itch. I turned to check on Riley. He'd been quiet since we entered. Head bent, shoulders hunched, lips pressed tight. Then he coughed. It was small, almost polite, but something dark flickered between his teeth as he exhaled. A black thread, hair-thin, whipping like fishing line caught in the wind, stretching from molar to molar before snapping back into his throat. His eyes widened in horror, and everyone froze. Riley sat doubled over, eyes wet, lips trembling. That black filament still seemed to dance on memory between his molars. Doc Shaw didn't waste time with comfort. She crouched, snapped open her med kit, and began talking as she worked. "We have 3 rules now," she said, voice clipped, clinical. "Rule 1, freeze it. Rule 2, starve it. Rule 3, silence." She ordered 2 of the perimeter crew to drag a plastic barrel out from storage. They filled it with chipped ice and snow shoveled from outside. It looked medieval, improvised torture, but this was medicine now. "Riley," Shaw said, "get in." He stared at her like she was insane. "You want those things chewing up your lungs, we freeze the pathways." With Kaplan's nod, we helped lower him in. Riley's scream curdled against the hangar canvas as the water bit. His body thrashed, steam rising off his skin where the warmth left him. But after 30 seconds, the black threads in his mouth receded, curling back down his throat like worms afraid of daylight. Shaw barked, "Hold him 5 minutes." When Riley stumbled back out of the barrel, half-conscious, she wrapped him in plastic liners from the supply shelves, painter's sheeting, duct-taped tight at wrists, ankles, and throat. He looked like a man in a crinkled cocoon, but Shaw's logic was cold. No oxygen exchange, no food for the motes. Oz muttered, "You're suffocating him." Shaw snapped back, "Better suffocation than assimilation." The blackout held. Radios clicked with only static. Shaw moved from heater to heater, shutting every last one off. Then she pointed at the comm rig. "Bag it, wrap it in foil. Anything that hums, anything that sings, they'll ride it." Burns improvised with aluminum thermal blankets, cocooning the rig until it looked like a crumpled satellite. The hangar dimmed to silence, no hum, no hiss, no background comfort of machinery, just our breaths, shallow and uneven. "Faraday in spirit," Shaw said, "maybe not physics, but enough to starve their ears." The cold pressed back in, deliberate as a tide. Our teeth began to chatter. Frost glazed the edges of our boots, and Riley shivered violently inside his plastic wrap. Still, it was better than the alternative. Kaplan gathered us close. "Repeat the rules." "Freeze," Burns said. "Starve," Oz added, though his eyes kept flicking to the black pinstripes under his own skin. "Silence," I finished. We clung to them like scripture. Quiet stretched too long. That's when I heard it, a faint sound from the vent above us. Not wind, not the canvas creaking. A voice. "Riles," it whispered. Riley's head snapped up. His eyes went wide. "No," he breathed. The voice came again, clearer, coaxing. "Riles, it's me. Don't you recognize me?" I saw tears freeze at the edge of his lashes. "That's my brother," he said, voice breaking. "He's been dead 3 years." The vent rattled once. Then the voice, his brother's voice, pitch perfect, laughed. The choir had learned to sing. Echo died 6 miles from the extraction point. 1 minute she was grinding forward through drifts, the next the engine seized, coughed black smoke, and fell silent. The sudden absence of her diesel heartbeat left us listening to our own shallow breathing. The cold moved in instantly, greedy as a creditor. Kaplan stared at the useless dash. "She's done." Shaw tightened Riley's cocoon of plastic sheeting. "Then we walk." Wind shear cut across the ice plain, carving invisible walls that staggered us sideways. The world was nothing but white, horizonless, sky and ground blurred into one killing sheet. We lashed ourselves together with a rope line, Kaplan at the front, Burns at rear, the rest of us spaced like beads on a string. "Stay taut," Kaplan shouted over the wind. If one goes, we all dig in. Every gust stole heat through our layers. Even wrapped in Arctic gear, the cold found seams, wormed into bone. Frost clung to our lashes, turning every blink into a grind of ice on skin. Shah moved down the line every half hour, gloved hands prodding faces and fingers. Chen's cheeks had gone waxy white. Shah slapped them hard until color blushed back. Riley's lips were cracked purple, his breath shallow inside the plastic wrap. Oz flexed his hands constantly, not from discipline but fear. The black pinstripes on his wrist were hidden under tape, but we all knew. Frostbite and infection, two different clocks racing to zero. We reached a jagged cut in the ice, a ravine 40 feet wide filled with shadow. Wind screamed through it like an organ pipe. Crossing meant death by fall or by hesitation. Kaplan fixed the rope around an ice-anchored pole, clipped her harness, and went first, step by step on a snow bridge no wider than a boot sole. Her silhouette swayed above the void, then she was across. "Next," she called. One by one we shuffled across, harness clipped, rope trembling with every gust. Below us the dark yawned, deep as forever. Riley whimpered the whole way but made it. Oz came last. His boot slipped twice, the rope jerking taut, but he reached the far lip. We thought the worst was past. An hour later, exhaustion dragged us into staggered steps. The Noah shack's silhouette finally rose out of the white, four walls of corrugated steel, half buried in snow. A miracle. "Oz, hold the line," Kaplan ordered. He nodded, trudged 2 steps, then stumbled. His right hand slammed into the ice, glove catching on a jagged ridge. The leather tore. Cold air knifed his exposed skin. Black motes bloomed from the tear, writhing like ink poured into water, spreading across his palm in seconds. Oz screamed into the gale, and the rope line went taut. By the time we hauled Oz inside the Noah shack, the black veins had already spidered past his wrist. They pulsed under his skin, racing for the elbow. Shah stripped off his torn glove, eyes hard. "We have one option," she said flatly. "We cut it off or we all die." Oz shook his head violently. "No, you can't just." Kaplan crouched eye to eye. "It's that or you join the choir, and then you bring it straight through these walls." Riley whimpered in his plastic wrap cocoon. Burns looked away. Shah slammed her kit on the table. Decision made. Tourniquet, blade, alcohol, move. Kaplan yanked a belt free from her parka, looped it above Oz's bicep, and pulled until the veins beneath turned a sickly pale. Burns held him down against the metal table, his weight pinning Oz's shoulders. Shah rummaged through a supply drawer and produced the ugliest tool imaginable, a steak knife, serrated, black with rust near the hilt. She doused it with clear liquor from a field bottle, flame-tested the edge until it hissed. "Generator off," she barked. Kaplan killed the switch. The shack groaned as the heater died, temperature dropping like a stone. Shah's breath fogged. "We need the cold, it slows the spread." Oz screamed before the knife even touched him, as if his body knew what was coming. Shah didn't hesitate. She sawed through skin and tendon, blood fountaining dark against the frost. The black motes fought back. They surged up his arm, writhing against the tourniquet, seeking escape. Shah worked faster, the serrations tearing rather than slicing. Kaplan muttered, hold him, hold him." Burns grunted, muscles straining. Riley turned away, gagging. At last the final tendon snapped with a wet pop. The arm came free. Shah cauterized with a heated wrench pressed from the stove's flame. Oz's scream went high, then cut into ragged sobs. The stench of seared flesh filled the shack. Kaplan shoved the severed arm into a plastic liner. The motes were visible now, churning beneath the skin like black static pressing against fingernails, bulging veins outward. Out, Kaplan said, voice flat. Burns kicked the door open. Together we staggered into the -40 wind, snow ripping at our faces. We dumped the arm into a snow pit, buried it deep in the drift. For a second, silence. Relief. Then the drift moved. The severed forearm writhed under the snow, fingers flexing independently, the hand clawing upward like something trying to be born. The black veins glowed faintly against the frost, pulsing like a separate animal. The snow shivered, rising as if the limb were tunneling out. And every one of us understood. Cutting it off didn't kill it. The night after Oz's amputation, none of us slept. Every creak of the Noah shack sounded like the severed arm scratching at the walls. Then just before dawn we heard it knocks, 3 sharp raps, a pause, then 2, then 3 again, not from the door, not the roof, beneath the frozen lake outside the shack. Kaplan was first to move, rifle at her shoulder. Shaw pressed her ear to the ice-slick floor, eyes wide. "It's patterned," she whispered. "Not random like Morse." Another sequence thudded up through the permafrost. Short, short, long, short, long, short. Burns swallowed hard. Somebody's alive under there. We dragged the old ice auger from the storage shed, its teeth rusted but serviceable. Wind howled as we hauled it to the edge of the frozen inlet. The knocks grew louder the closer we got, echoing through the ice sheet like a giant heartbeat. Kaplan braced the auger, Burns cranked. The bit screamed as it chewed through a foot of ice. Shards glittered in the half-light. Finally, water gurgled up dark and cold. A hand shot through, human, pale, trembling, desperate. We hauled her out by her parka hood, a woman in her 30s, face frost-burned, hair matted to her cheek. She gasped in Russian, half choking on lake water. Riley, still wrapped in plastic, muttered, "Oh, hell no," Russian. Shaw knelt by her side, fumbling broken phrases in medical Russian. Slowly, words aligned. Her name was Nadia, a researcher. Her station had been closer to the crash site. Inside the shack, we wrapped her in blankets. She shook violently, lips blue. Between coughs, she spoke in fragments. Team tried, signal voices singing in the snow. We exchanged uneasy glances. Shaw pressed. "Signal how?" Nadia's eyes found ours. She tapped the wall 3 quick beats, then 2, then 3 again. The same rhythm we'd heard in the ice. Her voice steadied. "We knock. We think maybe code, maybe language." She coughed again, blood flecking her lip. Kaplan leaned closer. "And did it answer?" Nadia's stare was hollow. "Yes." Silence crushed the room as the wind moaned outside. The choir answered back. For 12 hours, Kaplan called it what it was, a truce. We had food, water, and a wounded man. Nadia had knowledge, raw, fractured, but critical, so we pulled the folding table into the center of the Noah shack and laid our cards down. "Not allies," Kaplan said, "not enemies either. We stay alive by sharing." Nadia nodded once, lips pale. "Treaty," she whispered. Shaw spread out our soaked mission folder. Satellite photos, weather reports, cargo manifests with half the lines blacked out. Nadia slid her own notes across, pages of cramped Cyrillic, water-warped, ink blurred, sketches of the choir's shapes, threads curling, knots twisting into honeycomb lattices. Burns squinted. "Looks like circuits." Nadia tapped the page. "We think it organizes, not random." Shaw wanted proof. She shoved one of our specimen jars. A glove scrap contaminated with motes, out the broken window, and left it in the -40 wind. The black threads inside went sluggish, curling like dying worms. Then she placed another scrap near a space heater for just 1 minute. The motes writhed awake, probing glass, tapping like trapped flies. Nadia didn't flinch. Cold prison, heat freedom. Burns rigged a field recorder, its battery jury-rigged to the small generator. He set the mic by the floor vent where we'd first heard the knocking. Hours passed. Snow howled. Then the mic captured it, faint, insectile syllables, not Morse, not static, something in between. Shaw played it back on low volume, notebook ready. The sound made my jaw ache like it was vibrating bone. Nadia closed her eyes, murmuring translation attempts. It asks, it copies. We carried the recorder to the snow pit where Oz's severed forearm still writhed faintly under the drift. Shaw pressed play again, volume almost whisper thin. At first, nothing. Then the motes spilled upward from the pit, aligning themselves in branching shapes across the ice, curves, crosshatches, angles like letters but no alphabet we knew. Burns staggered back. It's writing. Nadia's eyes reflected the black glyphs. No, she breathed. It is answering. The choir was spelling something in the snow. Burns hunched over the battered drone console, his gloved fingers trembling. "You need to see this," he muttered. The screen bloomed with infrared. The blank Arctic stretched endless except for a dozen moving poles of warmth, thin and vertical, weaving under the snow like roots searching for light. Shaw leaned closer, her breath fogging the monitor. "They're not just following us, they're mapping the ice from below." The feed flickered. Each pole bent, twined, then disappeared, only to reappear yards away. It was like watching subterranean trees learning to walk. Kaplan snapped her rifle bolt. "We can't let them surface here. Shack won't hold." "What's the plan?" I asked. She exhaled. "We pull them off, give them something hotter to chase." We scavenged the flare box, 6 magnesium rods, each hot enough to blind through snow. Kaplan drove the Snowcat's dead battery pack into a sled as bait, wiring it with the flares. Riley, still pale inside his plastic cocoon, whispered, "You're making a bonfire for ghosts." Kaplan ignored him. She planted the sled out on the ice, flares primed to ignite in sequence. Then she traced a route on the map, a natural ice cul-de-sac half a click north, cliffs on 3 sides. Once they are in, we snap freeze the whole basin, lock them down. Shaw explained it quick. The Noah shack had liquid nitrogen canisters for cryo samples, long forgotten but intact. We'd rig them with charges, detonate over the cul-de-sac just as the choir gathered. Instant deep freeze. Burns grinned thinly, like pouring concrete into ants' nest. The flares went off one by one, dazzling against the dark sky. The drone showed the warm poles converging, veering toward the bait, accelerating under the snow like sharks scenting blood. We held our breath as the sled dragged them closer, every pulse of infrared confirming the trap. The cul-de-sac loomed ahead, ringed by walls of ancient ice. "Now," Kaplan whispered, but before we could prime the canisters, the ground beneath us gave a sick groan. The basin walls shuddered, cracks shot like lightning across the surface. Then, with a deafening roar, the cul-de-sac collapsed inward, snow and ice plunging like sand into a sinkhole. The drone feed went black. Shaw screamed. It wasn't a cul-de-sac, they hollowed it. And the warmth signatures flared brighter, rising toward us through the collapsing ice. We thought the choir was just threads, motes, shadows under the ice. We were wrong. The worn bodies are fallen and theirs were still out there. And now they weren't stumbling puppets. Through night vision, we saw them coordinating. 3 carried a supply crate between them, shoulders locked. Another boosted 2 more up an ice face, bodies bent into a living ladder. They were becoming a team. Not people anymore, but learning how to be. We killed the lights and moved under NVG glow. The snow field shimmered green, shadows long. The worn bodies moved parallel, silhouettes jerking closer with uncanny speed. "Cut lines if they breach," Kaplan hissed. We had ropes tied waist to waist, safety in the blizzard, but safety was also a leash. Shah's hand flew in silent signal, slow, left flank, shallow step. We mimed the signs back. But behind us, faint as static, whispers drifted on the wind, voices in cadence, mimicking us. Burns froze. "They're echoing the commands," he mouthed. One of the worn figures lurched forward, carrying something in its arms, an old radio pack. Ariel snapped, but sparking faintly. It wasn't random, it was bringing its hive ears closer. Kaplan slashed her rope free. "Lines off, move solo." We cut fast, cords whipping loose. Freedom, but also the terror of isolation in the dark. In silence, we raised fists, pointed fingers, chopped across throats. Our hands spoke discipline, but the whispers behind us twisted each gesture into sound, as if the choir was translating for its own. "Stop, left, climb." The same orders we gave ourselves, muttered back in distorted voices. They were stealing our language and giving it to the dead. We scrambled into a shallow ravine for cover. Riley stumbled, falling to his knees. Kaplan yanked him up, and her NVG caught a figure just ahead, a worn body. It stood still, half-lit by the aurora shimmer, its face Morales's. He'd been lost in the crash hours before. It wasn't attacking, not yet. In its stiff hands was a photo, laminated and bent, the one Morales had kept taped inside his locker, his family, his kids. The body tilted its head, staring down at the picture. Its fingers traced the outline of the faces. For the first time it hesitated, and I couldn't tell if it was just mimicking, or if something of Morales still remembered. We couldn't outrun them forever. Kaplan slammed her fist onto the workbench inside the Noah shack. "We build something they can't cross. We freeze the ground beneath them harder than this hell already is." Doc Shaw's eyes lit with a grim kind of clarity. "A thermosiphon, crude but possible. Suck heat out of one place, bleed it into another until the ice cracks and locks down." We tore through the outpost's wreckage. Old copper tubing from a gutted weather balloon rig, a radiator from the Snowcat's backup heater, even the thin piping from a defunct water system. Shaw coiled it all into a grotesque loop that looked like intestines, bent with pliers and bare hands until her gloves split. Burns muttered, "That thing's gonna blow before it freezes." "Then stand back when it does," she snapped. We had one barrel of diesel left. Kaplan insisted we risk it. We jacked the drum onto a sled, punched a line through the coil, and forced the viscous fuel to circulate with a scavenged pump motor. Every drop would run the siphon for maybe 2 hours. Riley's teeth chattered inside his plastic cocoon. "You're feeding them our ride home." Kaplan didn't look up. "Better cold here than warm in their arms." The Noah shack had ancient crank freezers, hand-spun units once used for cryo samples. Burns hauled them outside, one by one, until his back gave out. Each crank built a reservoir of compressed cold, primed like grenades. Shaw synchronized watches. "When the choir hits the kill zone, we open everything at once. The siphon will drop the ground 30 degrees in minutes. It'll turn their bones to glass." We set the trap along a narrow corridor of ice, walls funneling inward. Flares marked the entry. The copper coil glowed faintly with frost as the siphon bled heat out. We crouched in silence, rifles ready, breath fogging inside our masks. The first worn bodies appeared, Morales among them, face waxy, photo still clutched in hand. Behind them, warm poles shimmered beneath the ice. They moved exactly where we wanted them. Shaw whispered, "Now." The crank freezers screamed as they released their reservoirs, air hissing into vapor, temperature plunging. The siphon howled, snow crust cracking, rime racing across the ground like veins of white fire. For a heartbeat, the choir faltered. Black motes slowed, worn bodies staggered mid-stride. Then I saw it, condensation curling in the air, pooling like smoke. The worn bodies exhaled in unison, slow, measured, rerouting their own warm breath into the trap zone. The ice fog thickened, warming the corridor from the inside out. Shah's face drained of blood. There, beating the cold. And the trap, our cold engine, began to fail as the choir turned our own biology against us. The glyphs Nadia had coaxed from the pit weren't letters. Up close, Shah traced them with her pencil, hands shaking from cold. "Not an alphabet," she muttered. "It's pathways." The lines branched like rivers on a map, but every curve converged into nodal points. When she overlaid them against Burns's thermal drone images, the match was obvious: the warm poles under the snow. The choir wasn't just moving blindly. It was mapping heat itself. Shah's notebook filled with frantic sketches. It doesn't just devour, it catalogs: hunger's instinct, curiosity's choice. Kaplan frowned. "So which one are we?" "Both," Shah answered. "We're fuel and data. It studies us as it eats us." Nadia nodded grimly. "My team thought same. We gave it fire, it followed. We gave it words, it copied, always learning, always taking." To test the theory, Shah pulled her glove off for just a second, palm bare in the -40 air. Steam plumed. The glyphs on the ice stirred, threads of motes pulling into new formations. Kaplan cursed and yanked her back. "You wanted to smell blood." But Shah's eyes were alight. "No, look, it's responsive. It's drawing toward the warmth of a hand." Sure enough, the motes assembled a new pathway, lines fanning outward like dendrites in a neural net. A pulsing node bloomed at the end, brighter than the rest. Nadia translated the gesture in a whisper. "It's making a connection, like neuron to neuron." Burns muttered, "You're telling me this thing's building a brain." The motes shivered, reconfiguring into yet another map. Kaplan ordered, "Back away from it now." We stepped back, but Shah froze mid-motion. Her eyes tracked the glyph with horror. The newest pathway didn't spread aimlessly. It started broad like before, but then narrowed, focused, spiraled. And at the terminus of the pattern, its final glowing node, was the outline of a chest cavity. Specifically, Doc Shah's chest. The choir wasn't just mapping heat. It was mapping her. The storm peeled away like a curtain. Suddenly, the Arctic lay bare under a sky so clear it looked carved from glass. The temperature plummeted to -60. Our breath crackled midair. Shah stared at the frost on her eyelashes. "We have 1 hour, maybe less. This cold, this is our weapon. If we use it right, we can end this." Kaplan called it the white hour. We packed fast: flares, ropes, nitrogen charges scavenged from the NOAA freezers. Burns clipped the last detonator to his vest. We stagger flares to lead them into the low basin. Heat lures them, cold kills them. Clean and simple. Riley muttered, "Nothing simple with them anymore." Kaplan ignored it. She drew paths in the frost on the shack's table, every line deliberate. We stay in silence, hand signals only. We moved like ghosts across the flats, only the crunch of boots betraying us. Flares hissed orange in the snow behind us, each one carefully spaced, guiding the motes like breadcrumbs. The air was so cold our own sweat froze to our collars. Our lungs rasped, every exhale a plume that looked almost alive. Riley's cocoon crackled when he shifted, but for once the motes were sluggish. They clung to the flare heat, drifting toward our trap. The cold thickened into a low fog, a pale river hugging the ground. It muffled light, turned our NVGs grainy. Even sound changed. Boots struck like hammer blows, then vanished into dead air. Burns signed steady pace. Kaplan flashed back hold line. In that deathly calm, even our hearts seemed too loud. The white hour pressed deeper. No wind, no storm, just silence so complete it ached. For a fleeting moment it felt like the choir was gone. Then a whisper crackled under my hood, frozen fabric rubbing my ear. No voice, just static like a radio tuned to nothing. But Riley looked back at me, eyes wide. He'd heard it too. We reached the rim of the basin, the trap site. The flares glowed steady, motes hovering like black ash above the snow. That's when Morales, his worn body still trailing us at the edge of the group, slipped. His boot hit a seam, the ice cracked. He tumbled forward, vanishing into a crevasse. For half a breath we thought we'd lost him to the void. Then the choir surged up from the darkness below, dragging him down with them. The crevasse roared shut like a mouth. And the white hour was no longer silent. Morales didn't die in the fall. His radio crackled faint through layers of ice, voice chopped by static. Still here, not alone. We huddled at the crevasse lip, every face stricken. The choir hadn't consumed him yet. It was wearing him, but only halfway. Morales's NVG feed still streamed grainy images to our console. Black motes crawling his arm like tattoos, his body slumped against a wall of ice. Tendrils rippled beneath his skin, but his eyes were still his. Kaplan barked into the mic. "Morales, listen, you fight it, you hear me." He answered with a ragged laugh. "Sarge, I'm already half a ghost, but I can still pull a trigger." Shaw rummaged in the gear bag and produced the last liquid nitrogen canister, a field sample tank rigged with a manual vent. If he detonates it down there, it'll flash freeze everything within 20 feet, him included. Riley shook his head. "You're asking him to." "He's already asking us," Kaplan cut in. We lowered the canister on a rope. Morales's trembling hand reached up on the feed, veins black, fingers stiff as sticks. He caught it against his chest like a relic. On the radio, his voice came steady, trained. "I need to test, make sure I'm still me." He lifted his infected hand. Fingers twitched erratic, some curling on their own. Then slowly, deliberately, he raised 2 fingers, the ranger hand signal for "watch my back." The line crackled with silence. He was still fighting. Then we heard him whisper, half prayer, half training mantra, "Not yours, not yet." A pause, breath rasping. Then his voice, crisp, command clear, "Now." The feed jolted with motion, the canister vent hissing, ice fog exploding outward. The screen went white. Above, our radios filled with static shrieks, human and not. The thermosiphon groaned like a wounded organ. Copper coils shrieked, diesel pumps coughed, and then the whole rig began to sing, a hollow metallic moan that echoed across the basin. Kaplan's voice was calm but tight. "That's our line. Once the bombs drop, no one crosses it." Above us, the cloud layer tore open as the bomber passed. 3 dull shadows slid across the ice, each carrying payloads of liquid nitrogen, our last chance to lock the choir under forever. The vent at the crevasse roared. Black threads streamed upward, twisting together like cables, forming shapes too close to human. Riley whimpered inside his plastic-wrapped cocoon while Burns chambered rounds that wouldn't matter. Shaw jammed a syringe into her thigh, adrenaline hiss, eyes wild. "Keep them in the kill zone." Force them to stay under the vent when the drop comes. We formed a half circle at the lip, rifles spitting tracers into the mass. Bullets did nothing, but the light hurted them, motes shifting like a school of fish. A surge broke left, threads seeking warmth from the flare stockpile. If they escaped, the trap failed. Nadia tore free from Kaplan's grip. I brought them voices, I'll bring them silence. She sprinted, clutching her radio pack. A cloud of black motes swarmed to meet her. She dove into the ravine, screaming a single phrase in Russian that we couldn't translate. Her radio detonated in white fire. The swarm convulsed, dragged back toward the vent. Kaplan's jaw locked. Hold the line, she bought us seconds. The bomber's silhouette returned, payload doors yawning. Shah's gaze snapped to us, then to the seething vent. I can push them deeper. They follow warmth. If I go, Kaplan snarled, no, but Shah's expression was already set. I saw the maps, it chose me. Maybe I can make that mean something. She stripped her gloves, bare hands shining like beacons. The choir surged, threads twisting into dendrites chasing her heat. She walked straight into the gale of motes, arms raised like a conductor. Drop now, she screamed. The sky fell. 3 nitrogen bombs tore open, spraying liquid frost. A whiteout bloomed, instant and total. The choir writhed in shrieks beyond sound, every thread locking, stiffening, turning to brittle glass under the sudden cold. The basin iced over in seconds, blue layers climbing meter by meter, sealing the vent, sealing Nadia, sealing Shah. Silence, only wind remained. Kaplan lowered her rifle. It's done, for now. We staggered back to the shack, our bodies frost-burned, our minds hollow. The choir was entombed, the cold line held. Weeks later, home. Sunlight glared off warm pavement. In a quiet kitchen, Morales sat alone, sleeve rolled up to adjust his new prosthetic. The polymer fingers flexed smoothly, obedient to his nerve interface. Then, just for a heartbeat, one finger twitched on its own. He froze, stared, waited. The hand stilled. Had it moved? Or had he imagined it? Outside, the cicadas sang in heat.